Can you hear that? Nah, she's a bit rattly, isn't she? Now that's it. This motor's done. It's going to come out. This engine needs a decent crank, some decent rods, all matched and balanced, and decent bearings, none of which it has. Hello, here's the old 59 Flatty, and I'm just taking everything off it that I might be able to use on another engine, because as you know I'm not happy about this engine because of the noise it makes when I went out in the truck. I've just noticed something which might go part way to explaining why there's a noise. Can you see the marks on that piston there? Look, there's like a ring there and some heavier marks there. We'll look at the head. It would appear that that piston has been making contact with that head. When I rebalanced the flywheel, I was then prepared to rev the engine higher, and in revving the engine higher it has exposed this problem where at the higher revs the piston's hitting the head. That one looks fine and that one looks fine. It might be that that rod hasn't been shortened by as much as these rods have. These rods were all resized. Although I'd had this engine put on one side for a while, I decided to just get it out and put it in the stand and have a look at the bottom end. This is the one where all the conrods are different lengths and one of the pistons was hitting the head. I recently stripped down another 59AB and retrieved a set of conrods from it, all of which appear to be standard, you know, standard and original, but they are not like new old stock or anything like that. They're from a high mileage worn out engine. What I've done here, I've took out one of the rods and pistons, and this is one of the rods from the other engine. Unfortunately, what you can see is there's a lot of quite a lot of looseness, and if I have been doing this kind of two-handed, but if I can do this carefully, you might be able to see, kind of line up the join with the next rod. Can you see it moving? Hand on heart, the other rod also moves a little bit, but it doesn't move quite that much. So I don't think it would be worth trying to fit this set of rods, which at least they are all the right length, into this engine to try and bring it back up to running condition. This crank is for a rope seal. This bearing cap has the aluminium insert for a slinger seal. Now I know that these inserts are available for a rope seal, but I haven't got one. And here in the UK, I don't even know if I can lay my hands on one. So what I'm thinking of doing is using this crank which is the crank from the Piston Flatty, the 59A that I stripped down recently. I'm thinking of using this crank, which is standard in the old 59 Flatty, the Northfield Flatty. That's what I'm thinking of doing. But as you can see, this crank is a slinger type. What I've noticed is that you can actually press this into there, but it's got nothing to back it up. So what I was thinking of doing is mixing up a load of JB Weld, basically all of these, filling that cavity and then pushing this into it so that it will have the JB Weld behind it. Oh, the other thing I did, I put the conrod on there, and it is a little bit loose, but it isn't as loose as it is on the other crank. And these bearings, the outer diameter of these bearings, measure bigger than those bearings on the other crank. You're probably getting fed up of me just basically trying to use the parts I've got, but to be honest, it is so expensive to buy these parts, and I don't have buckets of them lying around, that to be honest, it's prohibitive. I don't want to throw that much money into one of these engines. So what I think I'll do, I'll push that onto there and then kind of clamp it on. Obviously it would have been a good idea to kind of pre-prepare that, wouldn't it? Let's I hope that the camera caught a lot of that. I know I'm kind of working on the fly. So there's that. There's a little bit on the crank there, that can all get scraped off afterwards. And there's that side. So who knows, it might work, mightn't it? So that will convert that from a slinger to a rope sail, which means now that basically there's no going back. I've got to use this crank in that engine. Right, okay, hey, a little bit of codgery and bodgery. Let's see if that works. In case anybody's wondering, I have got the part that goes in the block. This came out of that block that was scrapped because of panrail cracks. But on that particular block, I'll show you. This is the main cap from that block, and it has a rope seal, but can you see that it's one piece? It isn't a separate piece. It's not. I can't take this piece out to put it in that other cap. Just thought I'd show you those odd little things. So I will let that set overnight now. Hopefully I can get it off. I'll just hit it with a hammer, it'll come off, won't it? So let's see how that looks in the morning. This is the labyrinth insert for a slinger type crank, which I've just taken out of there. This is the type that takes a rope seal, and I'm going to fit that in there, and I've cleaned this area here And I'll put a bit of blue Hylamar on there. I don't know what they used at the factory. If anything, I'm not sure. Never done this before. Imagine it just gets held in by the main cap. So that's in now. This is the cap, and this is where I've filled the slinger thing with JB weld in there and there, and I'm hoping that that rope seal will work. I've trimmed that off flush with a razor blade, and trim this off almost flush with a razor blade as well. I haven't taken the rope seal out. This is the one that was just pushed into place with the arrow, with the JB weld. Who knows if it will work. I'm hoping that if I use the crank and rods from the Piston Flathead, it will bring this engine up to a decent condition. I took the crank and I put it in the lathe, and I have took some emery cloth like this and polished it up. I'll give it a wipe actually since, and I've left some marks on it, but it has shined up quite nicely. You can detect some wear, like there for instance, but I'm sure this crank will actually run. You know, it won't be too bad. I'll give it a kind of a rudimentary clean, scraped it off, wiped it off. I'll do it a bit more actually, get some of this mess out of here. But it doesn't look too bad. Don't look too bad. There's a mark there where it's sat for a long time, look, with against the bearing hole. But it doesn't look too bad. I've got a couple of little bits of mess to scrape off. It's quite good having it in the lathe because it's a good way of holding it. Oh, and I can clean that area there as well. So I'll do a bit more, and then I'll give it a bit of a test fit in the block. Okay, righto, I'll bring you back when there's more to show. Cheers then. I finished cleaning the crank up in the lathe. What I've done, I have kind of test fitted it in the block. These are on, and while not torqued down, they are tight, just done with a rattle gun. I wanted to just test the crank in the block to make sure it turned, and it does turn. It turns nice, turns nicely actually. There. So that's going round. So I will lift the crank out again, make sure everything's ready, put the oil seal in the rear retainer, and tighten it up again. The oil seal is in this one, but not in that one down below. Just showing you that a little bit of progress has been made. I took the crank out and I fitted that seal, and I'm going to put the crank back in. So I thought I would just show you how it goes in with it mounted vertically. I'll show you. There's plenty of oil on the bearings. I'm just going to put it in place and then worry about the cam timing after. Okay, that's in, and I think it's easier than trying to lift it over the studs. It would have been better if I'd moved that tray so I could put my foot inside there. So that's just another thing to think about. Every time you do it, you think of something that would be useful the next time you do it. Okay, so I turned this, so I don't know if it's going to align with the timing marks now. So let's rotate it. No, I'm out now on the timing. Okay. You can see the mark there, look, on the cam gear. And the mark is actually there on the tooth. It's not very clear. I can see it from this angle here. There's a 0 there. So I'm going to just rock the crank back, rotate a little bit and bring it back in. I need a bit more play than that. Hang on. I'm holding the crank top and bottom. That's in now and timed. One of the other things I like about having it on end like that is you can see this as you're moving it about. Plus you're not having to hold the weight of the crank. If you got it laid down, you can't see it and you're holding the crank. So I think this method works really well. Okay, good. Oh yeah, it turns okay. Turns nice actually. But it should do, I mean these bearings are got a bit of wear on them. They're the only standard size bearings I've got. I haven't got another set to choose from. Okay, right so. I cleaned all the rods up. I've cleaned the bearings. And I have fitted 7 out of the 8 pistons and rods assemblies. As I've been doing it, I've kind of realised there's a couple of little tips and tricks that I might as well mention. The first thing is that in my mind, doing this vertically is great because you can get at the top and the bottom of the engine at the same time. You're not fumbling around underneath. And when you are working vertically, let's say for instance I did this one and this one, you know, as a pair. And what you do the lower one first, because it's easier to get the lower one like this on to the crank than the top one, or rather it's easier to get the top one on after you put the lower one on. Like, I'm not an expert engine builder, I'm a terrible engine builder, but I have a go. Here's my piston. There isn't, well there might be a number there, I think that might be the front, but I just don't know with these rods. But basically, can you see that this side of the piston is a little darker than that side? This side is darker, so this side is the bit that goes towards the valves. This side here is the darker part of the piston. So in other words, on this piston, this is the front. and that's where it says Ford, made in Canada. So Ford made in Canada is to the front, and that number is to the front as well. So when I put this piston on this rod, the Ford of Canada will go towards the number 3. Okay, so that's my first little tips, my first little bit of guidance and advice to make it easier when you're doing this sort of job. Okay, I will put the piston on the rod and I will come back and shove it in. Here's my piston, Ford, made in Canada, and there's the number 3 there. So I'm going to just rest the piston, imagine the piston in the bore there, and I'm just going to spread the rings out. I'm going to move the oil ring away from the relief. There's a bit of a semi-relief on this one. I'm going to put the second ring to the top and the top ring to the bottom. So they're all like that. The bearings are in place. I'm just going to clean that and put some oil on it. So I'm just going to, the Ford is to the front, the numbers are to the front, that goes in there. You will notice that the rod journal is down. I could move it around a bit more actually. Let's just move it around a bit more. Just use the oil hole in the crank to grab it. Move it around like that. Another little tip is that I've found is when I'm fitting this, to fit it so that this part is against a stud, and then I can, now the only stud that's close by is that one there, so that's on there and this is against that stud, and it helps me to keep this relatively tight. By having it like this, I can kind of keep a tension on here. I've checked that the rod's not going to hit anything, so a little bit of tension on there. There we go, nice and easy. I struggled on the first one, but by doing that I was able to keep the tension on because it was reacting against the stud. So now it's just a case of pushing the piston down and guiding it onto there. Stick a bit of oil on there. You can raise the rod like that with your, with your finger. Get it squared up. No, that's not quite square. I can feel it resisting. Hang on. There we go. I was just pushing them down to square the rod. That's in now, and I can't see the number there on this side. In other words, the number's on the front. It's easier when you're doing the front ones. I've just cleaned the rod cap, put a bit of oil on it, look for the number. There's the number. The number's got to be to the front, so it's got to be like that, kind of working around the camera. just very gently. Tap it in place. Pistons come up a bit, so there. Okay. A bit lazy today. I'm using my using this. So there we are. There's the last piston in. What I did between each one is make sure that everything turned nice and freely. These will get torqued up properly. So really, just because it's fun, give it a turn over. That's not bad, is it? That's okay. Nothing's catching. Nothing's dragging. No funny noises. So what I'm interested in now is how close are the pistons to the top of the bore and how uniform are they. Well, that one is at the top. And that one is at the top. By a very similar amount, you'd have to say. And that one is at the top. Yeah, you know, this is 10 times better than it was. That was my piston that hit. Can you see the marks on it? I have had a look at the piston and it doesn't appear to be damaged. So, for the sake of completeness, there's its opposite number there, look. Yeah, that's okay, isn't it? Yeah, they're looking good, looking good. You know, this isn't a racing engine, this is just, I just want a dependable plodder out of this. Yeah, great. Bear in mind, this engine was desperate, wasn't it, when I got it? Okay, so when that's all torqued up, that will be an engine that I can then, at some point in the future, put into the truck. I'm not ready to do it yet. But I wanted to get all the parts in one place, get it all assembled. I'll oil all the bores, I'll oil everything and put it away until I'm ready to do something with it. I'm getting a bit fed up of having to swap parts from one engine to another to enable an engine to run, so I might see if I can source some more parts to enable me to just build this engine and have it ready to go. You know, there'll be some want ads put out, I think. You know, 59A heads, 59A oil pan, decent flywheels, decent starters. I think I'm okay for starters, actually. Okay, anyway, that's enough waffle. So I'll torque all that up, and the next job will be to fit a pair of heads, clean up and fit a pair of heads. I think I have a pair of heads that I can use. So that's the basic assembly. A new crank, new to this engine crank, a new set of rods, new to this engine set of rods, and it's all, as far as I can see, looking okay. Righto. Let's hope that when it runs okay and dependable. Right. Cheers then. Thanks a lot. I thought I'd just catch putting one of the pistons and rods in. Thanks a lot then. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.